So hi everyone, this is Blake Anderson and I'm a registered social worker and therapist here in Toronto, Ontario. I have over 14 years of experience as a registered social worker and 5 years working as a therapist. In this video, I want to just talk about some generalities in terms of when you go no contact. Not everyone decides to go no contact. You can still operate within the family system by limiting contact. But if you've tried many times to interact with your family and they've been quite cruel and toxic to you, and there's been no really acknowledgement of truth or of any sort of reconciliation in terms of them apologizing or correcting their behavior, then I'm speaking more to those scapegoats who have decided after probably many years to go no contact. And I want to talk about different strategies and approaches that you might want to consider for your own life and how you move forward, particularly with the fact that it's likely you've had to go no contact with your extended family. How do you deal with that loneliness, the isolation, the confusion, and your own inner dialogue and your own challenges with your mental, emotional health post-contact? When you go no contact, the first year, you're going to have a lot of confusion. You probably know it's the right decision, but that still doesn't prevent you from having your doubts. It's likely the case that you have some form of your family in you still. Like obviously you probably not want to seek revenge, but you probably think about scenarios about maybe you could have said this, or maybe you want to just phone them and tell them a piece of your mind one more time. And I think that if you're in a narcissistic abuse cycle though, I think you understand that is really, it's a false errand and it's not something that's going to benefit you or really going to actually affect them at all, really. And actually they probably will enjoy it and see you as, they'll probably paint you a certain way, maybe see you as the crazy one or the one that has the issues again. And then you're back into the defending, explaining, arguing sort of thing. So that's why it's truly has to be the case that you go no contact, because the only way you escape the narcissist and the narcissistic family is by stepping out of it entirely. And then you look back at your life and your childhood and it just seems it doesn't make sense why you had to go through all this, and those experiences you had were real, but then at the same time you interpret them different now and you assign different meaning to them because you understand that likely is the case that you're serving your parents largely, and it was mostly to do about their own self-seeking and their own ego. But the more I'm learning about this, the more I'm realizing that it's not really the fact that the narcissist has this exaggerated ego, but it's more about this egolessness, this identity confusion and disturbance, in the sense that they're not really a fully formed self, and yet there is that grandiosity and lack of empathy. But yeah, you look back in your past and it's likely the case that especially in the first year or two, a lot of memories you're going to be reflecting on, and probably also new things come to light as well. Like you probably pay attention to memories that you might have suppressed, and you also realize that when you went no contact, you're probably considering more the immediate past in terms of the experience you had maybe in the year or two before you went no contact. The more that you've removed yourself from the situation and had some distance, it gives you perspective on the fact that this happened for many years and you were scapegoated or bullied by siblings or by the parents. Maybe it's because you so desperately wanted to have a family. You ignored a lot of these red flags, and you probably knew things were off from many years. What to say, you still held on to the fact that perhaps you could still have a form of relationship. But now you look back and you realize how cruel a lot of these experiences were, and that there wasn't this sense of care and love from the very beginning. But now you're no contact and you have to decide, how do you live your life? It's tricky because usually around holidays, like the Christmas holidays coming up, everyone celebrates differently. During these holidays, it's like that you can become very emotional. But I think it's important to have a plan for the holidays and to consider, if you have your own family or your friends that you consider like your chosen family, you make a plan around the holidays, because I know that with some of my clients I've worked with, especially if they have an addiction, they're an alcoholic or they have the risk of drinking a lot, it's typically the case that they have to do a rewind. So they have to think about, let's say, if they go to the liquor store, they'll pick up a six-pack, go home and have the full six. And then the next day they might wake up and they, I don't know, maybe feel like crap. And maybe it's Saturday, and they have another drink, continue the pattern. And then it's Monday, they're hungover and they call in sick to work. This is a pattern where they start missing work because of their alcoholism. A lot of my clients that have to do the rewind, they know that once they go to the liquor store, they pick up that six-pack, it's likely going to be the case they're going to be drinking for a few days. But the question is, what led them to go to that liquor store? Often, I think some people don't have that mindfulness and they feel very down on themselves, like their inner dialogue is very negative, and alcohol can be used as a form of escape. But they know that once they go to the liquor store, they're likely going to start this bad habit that's going to lead them to probably affecting their career. And so I've talked to these individuals and they know that if they can stop themselves from going to the liquor store, and often this also comes down to cognitive behavior therapy, so it's understanding what triggered, what is the inner dialogue. So in the case of the scapegoat, it's considering that maybe the holidays are coming up, Christmas, and your family doesn't reach out, and you're maybe thinking about some of these memories you had with them, and maybe even some of the good times during Christmas, and that might lead you to drink, or it might just start your negative dialogue, having this notion of interjects. You have your family or your parents being like interjects, so there's this negative interjecting you that's putting you down or saying you're no good or you're always going to be alone, or just that are very negative. But you probably, a lot of times the inner dialogue, right? It's like we're not always fully present or mindful of this. We react to our thoughts and our feelings, and then our behavior, we just go along with, say it's drinking, or maybe we're hanging out with certain people that aren't good for us, and so we're in a more toxic relationship, but we reach out to that person again and start that toxic relationship again. This also goes to the notion of escape to the matrix of the narcissistic family. You can understand that narcissism exists within a lot of people. The more that I'm understanding, I think it's probably higher than the population. That some studies say that it's just like 1-2% of the population. And certainly, I think when it comes to full NPD, or full personality disorder, that's probably the case. At least that's what the studies point to and what Sam Gatkin says. But someone like a woman who wrote the book, I think it's Dr. Gavazia, she mentions that it's much higher, like I think it's closer to 10%. I think even she said maybe 10 to 15% of the population. And if you also understand that you have these wounds from a young age, this notion of abandonment wound, there's just the sense of, you being a scapegoat, probably internalized some of this inner dialogue from your family. You know, even people that you consider nice aren't like villains in the movie, right? Somebody with a black hat that you can like exactly know that they're this evil person. But rather, it's typically people in your life that come into your orbit. And at first, there's notion of the shared fantasy. And like any relationship, there's a level of idolization of each other and seeing probably the best of each other, and also getting flattered by the way they see you. This goes back to the fact that reality is difficult. And so I think a lot of us, especially scapegoats and people who have been through a hard life in terms of family of origin, easily get sucked back in, even if they have a lot of intellectual understanding, they've done the reading, they have done a lot of the inner work, but then yet they still find themselves in narcissistic dynamics. And it particularly could be in friend groups or with a partner or even in the work environment. The repetition compulsion. According to Freud, we repeat realities or certain situations in our life with this attempt to heal them. But if we don't really understand the lesson, we haven't done the inner work to fully integrate and grasp that feeling, then we continue to attract that situation and consider it normal and put up with it. But again, this is very subtle because let's say you meet a friend and think they're a great person and things are going well for four months or so, and you think, but then you start picking up on certain things. There's this pseudo-mutuality. You find that you're the one, let's say, they're maybe talking about themselves a lot, and you're the one listening, or they have a bit of grandiosity to them, and maybe you consider that to be confidence. If you're a scapegoat, you probably struggle with some insecurities, feeling lower than others, and playing small, right? And so maybe you attract yourself to a friend who, has grand visions and is ambitious and speaks very high of themselves, and you just consider it like healthy self-esteem. But then over time, you find yourself a pseudo-mutuality. You realize that they don't actually want to talk about you maybe, or in subtle ways they might even put you down, right? This notion of testing you and reading you, seeing what you're going to tolerate. Maybe for many days or months you ignore this and consider not everyone narcissistic. Maybe I'm just reading too much into this. But it comes to a point where you start to assert yourself and maybe you are just being independent with the friend group, and for whatever reason they don't like this, right? Because maybe they want you to be more subjugated to them and be lesser than them. So this is when the discard typically happens, or the devaluation phase happens. It could be several months where you're in the idolization phase with them, and then they start to subtly devalue you and make it seem like they're this great, or this, say they have these like grandiosity, and it's usually very subtle, and they're also probably testing you, seeing how much they can push you. Then there's the devaluation phase. You pick up on them and you realize this friend of mine, he actually is this kind of mutual guy. It's not giving really, so anyway, I think usually the healthier you're getting, the quicker you're going to end some of these dynamics. I think by journaling, checking in with your intuition, you don't want to go through your life like reject, like you could also put your walls up and not trust people, and I guess project onto people where your own childhood issues to others where it's actually not the case. But I think, especially if you're the scapegoat, you've likely struggled with a lot of self-doubt, and you've also probably made yourself small in relationships, because you should err on the fact that your intuition is speaking to you. When someone shows you the way they are, believe them. And so that's why I would say that better to probably err on limiting contact or going no contact with these individuals. Because at the end of the day, you are the common denominator of the people you hang out with. There's a saying, right, you're the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so I don't know if that's, let's say entirely true, but obviously the people you spend time with influences you and influences your perception and your own self-concept. Choose your friends wisely, especially on this healing journey with your family. I think life is mysterious. You can see things through a scientific or psychological lens. But I think that even if you take something like Carl Jung, the notion of the collective subconscious, the collective unconscious, you realize that we are connected in some capacities. And let's say the narcissistic element of life, you want to say demonic elements, but one could say there's evil in the universe. And certainly when you glimpse the narcissist and you come face to face with the narcissist, you've been on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse. It does, usually because you're a scapegoat, you tend to be more likely innocent, or at least have more innocent core to you, and you're probably a bit more naive, or you at least think that a lot of people are essentially good. So it puts into question when you confront these people and the malignancy of them, and you realize how cruel and in some sense evil they can be. The question is whether they're doing this intentionally is another question, but it's just to know that when you're on your healing journey, it's likely the case that you're going to be tested. People are going to come into your orbit that at first seem friendly and supportive. You might confide in them about the way you are or the way your family is. But over time, they start to devalue you and start putting you down. And you realize that, okay, is it just me, or am I just reading too much into this? But I think that, again, if someone shows you the way they are, believe them. It's like you actually saw this from the very beginning and ignored it. So I think it's important, too, as a scapegoat survivor or someone who's been through this dynamic in their family of origin or romantic life, to really pay attention to your intuition. When you pick up on these signs, believe them. So it's probably having a better picker, right? Because I think that we pick our friends, and so it's making better discernments from the very beginning. That comes down to also our own self-esteem and our own confidence, because certainly wouldn't put up with people that are any less than supportive or uplifting. Of course, everyone has their difficulties, but there's someone that has certain neuroticism, anxiety, or depression, dealing with their own struggles. And maybe there's some people that talk about themselves, and there's notion that people exist on a spectrum, of course. There's like the more codependent types that are like lesser kind of self-concept, and then there's people that are overinflation. And so I wonder in life is that if you come from a more codependent or you're scapegoated, it's perhaps the case that you attract yourself to some people who are a little more overinflated of self. But certainly there's a spectrum and a degree. If you're underinflated self, you probably can err on being more overinflated. Not that you want to become arrogant, but I think that you can err on having a healthier self-concept, talking yourself up, like thinking about it like it's an interview. In an interview, if you want to get a job, you're definitely going to speak to the more positive elements of your character or experience. But I think as a scapegoat or as a codependent type, you can build yourself up again, anchored in reality. You don't want it to the narcissist, but you can have a healthier concept. Based in reality, when you no contact, you're likely going to be tempted, and a lot of this is going to feel natural when you meet these people because it's what you're probably comfortable. It's knowing that, yeah, I had a client where she said, I always continue to attract myself to these narcissistic men. How can I stop this? She didn't say repetition compulsion, but that's what she was doing. It's interesting because physically, sexually, you could be attracted to these people, but then you find people that are healthier, less interesting. And that's why probably our brains and our circuits of our brains are very much conditioned to find people that are probably maybe less healthy for us, more attractive. The sexuality of the sex can be very passionate and very intense. And the thing is, that's usually a more notion of trauma bonding. In this video, I just wanted to talk about when you go no contact, it's likely you're going to be tempted from the underworld, you can say it, from the subconscious, are likely still, you're going to still be tempted because, you know, the spirit of yourself is moving and growing. The other aspect of life, one could say the evil aspect, or the poles of the narcissistic elements of your lineage. Like first it was the flying monkeys, and then it was the minions, it was the narcissist like that you were born from, the wolves that raised you. They no longer have their ability to control you. But then there's the extended mind and the collective. And I do believe in some aspects that life does have more mysterious elements. And I do believe that people come into your life to test you and try to pull you back in. So I would just stay strong, focus on the better angels of your nature, find people in your court that truly do have your support and you can trust. Don't shut yourself off to the world where you're completely having your walls up where you don't let anyone in. Let's be on the watch, have a better screening of people. When you see a red flag, step out and move forward in your life and don't hang out with that person. I would say journaling helps, like staying observant, being mindful also of your inner dialogue where, you know, like that's, I was talking about the rewinding with drinking or alcoholism or with getting maybe back in a toxic relationship. You want to be more mindful of, okay, I'm in a bad mood, it seems like I want to go to the liquor store today. Instead of doing that, I'll go to the gym or I'll phone a friend. So you're replacing that bad habit with a more positive habit, and that's based again on cognitive behavior therapy and making better decisions in your life. You know, easier said than done, but when your inner dialogue is negative and you're maybe lonely or there's this trigger from maybe the holidays or there's some way in which these interjects are coming back into your mind and think more negatively, it's finding coping mechanisms and ways to make better decisions. And some of this just takes slowing down, being more mindful, maybe it's a therapist that you check in with, keep you accountable. But yeah, I would just say that encourage you to be on the watch, especially when you went no contact. This journey's never ended. It's not just the case that you go no contact that you're entirely free from this dynamic. I think you're always going to be tested. In this video, I talked about aspects of the journey in terms of going no contact and what you maybe expect also in the external world and how certain situations are likely to be recreated. It is an ongoing journey. If you did like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks and have a great day.